This week we're taking a look at a baptism story in Acts chapter 8. And this is when Philip baptizes the Ethiopian eunuch. So Ethiopia is a long way away from the center of Judaism, but there's a lot of Jewish people in Ethiopia even today. So here we have an official from Ethiopia who has come to celebrate a religious festival in Judea, and Philip is directed by the Spirit to encounter this man on his chariot. They're riding on the chariot together, and they have a discussion about Isaiah chapter 53, and Philip applies the text to Jesus with this Ethiopian eunuch. And that brings us to verses 36 through 38, two very important verses. Wait a minute, you say. 36 through 38 is 3 verses. You're right. We're going to look at 36 and 38 first, and then we'll circle back around and have a conversation about verse 37. So first up, let's take a look at verse 36. This is from the ESV. And as they were going along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "See, here is water. What prevents me from being baptized?" So let's take a look at this verse carefully in Greek, and then we'll press on to 38. Hoste eporuanto kata tein hodon. Let's break there for a moment. So hoste and as eporuanto is an imperfect verb. They were going kata tein hodon down the road. So remember, they're in a chariot. This is an official, this is an important person, so they don't have to be driving the chariot, but they're in a chariot, they're going down the road. Something happens. Elthon epi ti hudor. So they came upon some water. And the key here for some water is this unaccented T. So tau iota without an accent, some water. T hodor. Hudor. Hodor is the guy from Game of Thrones. Let's go on and look at the next part. Kaiphasin ho eunuchos, and the eunuch says, Idu hudor, behold or look water. Ti kolue, another T. Ti kolue me baptisthenai. So this T has an accent, and it doesn't mean some, it's the interrogative what. So T kolue, what prevents me, baptisthenai, to be baptized. And this is a passive verb, and that's going to be very important for us, a passive verb. Here's water, look, water. What prevents me to be baptized? What's keeping me from being baptized? If I've heard this message in Isaiah 53, if I've heard you apply it to this Jesus, and if I believe that, what would stop me from being baptized right here in this water that we've come across as we're going down the road? Great question. Before we get to the answer, let's talk about these T's. Notice how important it is to recognize the difference between the unaccented T and the accented T. You could very much change the meaning if you didn't notice the absence of the accent. So, T hudor, some water, a nondescript, unidentified body of water. It doesn't matter what body of water it is, it's just some water. But then we get the second T, T kolue, it's important for us to recognize the interrogative. What prevents me? What's keeping me from being baptized? There's water here. You and I are here. I've heard this message and accepted it. What would prevent me from going into the water right now? It's a fantastic question. The last thing I want to talk about with this verse is the fact that baptisthenai is a passive verb. So what? It's not something that you do, it's something that is done to you. Baptism is something that one person does to another person. You can't very well baptize yourself. This is a thing that one person does to another person. Let's go on to verse 38, and then we'll circle back to 37. And he commanded the chariot to stop, and they both went down into the water, Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. All right, so we're going to skip over and he commanded the chariot to stop, and we'll pick up with they both went down into the water. Kai katebesan amphoteroi eis to hudor. This is fantastic stuff. So kai katebesan, and they went down amphoteroi together. So it's important that we recognize that the two of them together went down eis to hudor, into the water. The two of them didn't go to the edge of the water. They didn't approach the water. They didn't go near the water. The two of them together went into the water. Then the next part, hote Philippos kai ho eunuchos. Both Philip and the eunuch. So we get a clarification to make sure that nobody misunderstands. It wasn't just the eunuch that went into the water with Philip on the land. It wasn't something that was, they didn't go down and dip some water out. The two of them together went into the water, both Philip and the eunuch. And then after that we're told, kai ebaptisen auton, and he baptized him. Philip baptized the eunuch. So note the dynamic with the clarifying emphasis that Luke, that Dr. Luke, man of science, includes in his description. They both went down into the water in keeping with the meaning of the word baptism. The root meaning of the word baptism is to immerse. It comes from the work of a fuller, someone who dyed fabric or material or bleached it, who took fabric that was one color, immersed it in a solution, and brought it out a different color. That's what baptism is. And here, in keeping with that meaning, we're told that both men went down into the water, both Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. So it maintains that significance. So we've had two T's, one without an accent that meant some, one with an accent that meant what, and then we had a te that meant both. So particles are important. It's important to recognize them for that significance and apply it in our understanding. Both men went into the water. Now let's get to verse 37. Okay, there really isn't a verse 37, at least not written by Luke in the first century. So let's take a look at the King James reading of verse 37, and then we'll see it from the NASB, the New American Standard Bible, a more modern translation that also has a verse 37. And Philip said, if thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Then the NASB says, and Philip said, if you believe with all your heart, you may. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So when the eunuch says to Philip, here's water, look, there's water, what's to keep me from being baptized right now? This is the purported response of Philip and then the answer to that from the eunuch. If you believe with your heart, you may. Yes, I do believe Jesus is the Son of God, and then he baptizes him. But this verse doesn't show up in the Greek manuscripts until the 12th through 14th centuries. So I want you to pause and think about that. For 12 sets of 100 years, this verse doesn't show up, okay? That's pretty significant. And I think the content of verse 37 gives us a hint as to why someone or some group of someones felt it was important to add this to the text. All right, so what occurs in verse 37? Philip conducts an examination of what we would in the modern context call a baptismal candidate. He asks him a question, or he poses the issue to him and says, a person who wants to get baptized has to have a belief, a wholehearted belief in and of themselves that about the act and its significance and what it represents. And then we get a confession from the eunuch, a public confession that says, yes, I do believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, so we have almost a sacramentalizing effect of baptism with verse 37. So in the 12th through 14th century, the church is a well-established thing, and there are people who might be concerned that Philip is a willy-nilly baptizer. Okay? He has a brief conversation with a guy about Isaiah 53. He tells him, hey, that text that you're studying talks about Jesus, and Jesus is the Son of God and fulfills all that. And the guy says, hey, I'm in. I want to be baptized. And willy-nilly baptizer Philip says, okay, let's get in the water and do it. It looks like there's a concern in the 12th through 14th century that we can't have willy-nilly baptizers out there, and we need to have some sort of formality to this and an examination to make sure that the person is in the right place and understands what they're doing and is prepared to make a public confession of the same. That's what it looks like, at least to my eyes, that's the effect that we have here. Philip examines the candidate, the candidate makes a confession of faith, and then the baptism proceeds. The story, as Luke records it, without a verse 37, shows a very sort of streamlined, low bar to entry, low threshold standard for this. When the candidate, if we use that word, when the person who's heard the gospel message decides they want to be baptized, that's good enough for Philip. Now, verse 37 turns this into a sacrament and a formal thing. It can't be because it would make your mom happy. It can't be because the girl that you're interested in won't date you until you join the church. None of those things can be a factor. And we have to make sure that your heart is in the right place. Philip apparently doesn't worry about such things. He sees someone who has a desire to respond to the gospel through baptism and says, you're right, there's water here, let's do it. Pretty good stuff. So it's not up for me to say which one is correct. You can probably sense my leanings in what I'm saying, but the need to complicate the process didn't show up for at least 12 centuries, at least not in the text of the New Testament. Last thing before we close, specifically within Protestantism, the text is supposed to be the whole determiner of doctrine. Within Catholicism and some Orthodox faiths, there's tradition and church law and things like that that come into it. And even within Protestantism, there's a consideration for historical context and precedent and things like that. But fundamentally, the text as it is written, as best as we can determine, is supposed to be the sole determinant of doctrine. So bear that in mind as you contemplate the absence for 12 centuries of verse 37, and then the inclusion of it with a seemingly clear agenda to make baptism a little more formalized, and then it's up to you to decide whether you think that was a good decision or a bad decision, or whether verse 37 should affect your policy position on how difficult it should be for a person who wants to get baptized to get baptized. Thanks for watching. I hope that was good for you. Leave me some feedback in the comments. Hit like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And until next time, Karis Kairene Humin, grace and peace to you.